Madam Deputy Clerk, the time is 7 p.m. I'm going to call this public planning meeting to order. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Regina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Who's having trouble? Is anyone having trouble hearing me? Who? I'm not sure. Can we turn that up a little bit?
That's good.
Okay. We'll get to that. Councilor, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Gallo, Councilor Thompson, any comments or questions? Call a vote. Councilor Gillen? Councilor Gillen's yes. Councilor Gardner? Councilor Gardner's yes. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain a public input regarding the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. For the planning applications that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning applications being considered. 2, then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns already filed. 3, following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually or in person and may speak twice for up to 5 minutes each time. And 4, following comments from members of the public, I will then ask members of council for their comments. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete a planning interested party and speaker request form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca, or complete a green interested party form. Linda's holding it up right there, and leave it with a committee coordinator, Linda, up at the front. Under the Planning Act, only the applicant has the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the Deputy Town Clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 5.1 on tonight's agenda, report number PDS 24112, application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 1000265-154 Ontario Inc., 180 Wellington Street East, Part Lot 106, Plan 246, Parts 1, 2, and 3, Plan 65R-39371. The file numbers OPA-224-02 and ZBA-2024-02. A notice of public planning meeting was mailed to all addressed property owners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands, including all properties on Center Street, east of the railway tracks, and published in the local newspapers, posted on the town's website, and posted on signage on the subject property. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Respecting item 5.2 on tonight's agenda, report number PDS 24113, application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, TWTH Development, Inc., 252, 260, and 272 Old Bloomington Road, Lot 6 and Part Lot 7, Registered Plan 166, file numbers OPA-2023-02, ZBA-2023-02, and related file numbers SUB-2023-02. A notice of public planning meeting was issued to all addressed property owners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands, published in the local newspaper, posted on the town's website, and posted on signage on the subject lands. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I will now ask Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For item 1, I'll ask our senior planner, Antonio Greco, to provide a brief overview of the application. And at that point, we can then turn it over to the applicant's planning consultant, Mr. Ryan Guter.
Thank you. Mr. Greco.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and members of the public. My name is Antonio Greco, and I'm a senior planner with the town. Before us tonight is a statutory public planning meeting for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the property municipally known as 180 Wellington Street East. The above slide provides site context of the subject property and surrounding area from bird's eye view. The subject property is approximately 1 kilometer east from the Yonge Street and Wellington Street West intersection and 450 meters west of the John Westway and Wellington Street East intersection. The property is also in close proximity to the St. Maximilian Kolbe Catholic High School. The subject property is located on the northeast corner of Wellington Street East and Industrial Parkway North. The property has an area of 1.08 hectares and contains 114 meters of frontage along Industrial Parkway North and 82 meters along Wellington Street East. The subject property is currently vacant, but was previously utilized as the Aurora Tire and Wheel and the Royal Wood Shop. To the north of the subject property is the U-Haul self-storage facility and commercial/industrial uses. To the east of the subject property are commercial/retail uses and the St. Maximilian Kolbe Catholic High School. To the west of the property is Industrial Parkway North and a 5-story mixed-use residential building with commercial retail uses at grade. Lastly, to the south is Wellington Street East and some additional commercial uses. The Town of Aurora official plan designates the property as Aurora Promenade and Major Transit Station Area MTSA mixed use. The subject property is further identified as Major Transit Station Area in Schedule D1 and Site-Specific Policy Area 58 in Schedule H of the town's official plan. The intent of the Major Transit Station Area is to serve as the town's primary focus for growth and intensification, accommodating the highest densities within Aurora. The Site-Specific Policy Area 58 outlines the site-specific development policies for the subject property, which includes an 8-story residential apartment building containing 2 towers with a common 2-story podium. The subject property is currently zoned second density apartment residential, RA2 exception zone 537 within the town's zoning bylaw 6000-17 as amended. This exception zone permits for apartment buildings, 8 stories in height, 223 residential units, and there are site-specific standards regarding setbacks, landscaping, and amenity area. This slide provides an illustration of what is currently approved on the subject property. In March 2021, the Ontario Land Tribunal approved the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan applications to permit for 2 apartment buildings, 8 stories in height, containing 223 units in total. The OLT decision has also removed the requirement for an urban square at this location. Following the OLT decision, a site plan agreement was signed between the previous owner and the town of Aurora to implement the approved development. The proposed development seeks 4 apartment buildings, 12 stories in height, for approximately 41.3 meters, 948 total residential units, 22 units being studio apartments, 703 units classified as 1 bedroom / 1 bedroom plus den, 180 units as 2 bedroom / 2 bedrooms plus den, and 43 units 3 bedroom apartments. 0.89 parking spaces per dwelling unit is being proposed, and that's inclusive of visitor parking and retail parking. That combines for a total of 850 total parking spaces, 687 which are resident spaces, 163 visitor and non-residential spaces. There are currently 2 vehicular access points, one aligned with Center Street, which serves as a pickup drop-off roundabout driveway, and an additional entrance at the northwest corner of the property, which serves the underground parking garage. The applicant proposes to amend site-specific policy area 58 to permit the following: to increase the maximum building heights from 8 stories to 12 stories, to increase the total number of buildings on the property from 2 to 4 apartment buildings, and to permit dwelling units on the ground floor fronting onto an arterial road. To enable the proposed development and build form on the subject property, the applicant is proposing a second density apartment residential RA2 exception zone. The RA2 site-specific provisions includes the following: retail uses, and specifically a coffee shop and convenience store, reduce minimum setback standards and amenity area, increase the maximum building heights and total number of units, and also to remove the requirement for landscaping. This slide provides a conceptual renderings from the various viewpoints for the proposed mixed-use apartment buildings. These renderings are considered conceptual and are subject to change based on the appropriate land use amendments being in place and subsequent planning applications. So the 4 viewpoints, we have one looking south from Industrial Parkway North in your top left. Bottom left, we have looking northwest from Wellington Street East. Top right being looking from Center Street, and the bottom right looking northeast from Wellington Street East and Industrial Parkway South intersection. In addition to tonight's public meeting, the applicant hosted a community information meeting on September 4th. At the meeting, there were various comments and discussions surrounding the following items. Will the proposed development contain access off Wellington Street East? No direct access will be provided off Wellington Street East. Vehicular access will be provided off Industrial Parkway North. Will there be a dedicated right turn lane when traveling westbound on Wellington Street East? Town traffic engineer and York Region have provided comments to the applicant in adding an exclusive westbound right turn lane at Wellington Street East and Industrial Parkway North to improve westbound through and right turn operations. What amenities are being provided as part of the proposed development? Currently, the proposed development will provide amenities such as a coffee shop, convenience store, workshare office, and fitness center, all located on the ground floor of buildings 1 and 2. The proposed applications have been circulated for review and comments. Staff have identified the following matters to be addressed: detailed review of the subject applications to be undertaken to address all comments, including those received from this public meeting; detailed review of this proposed site-specific zoning standards; further review of the proposed 12-story building heights; further evaluation of the proposed development's built form and its relation to the previous OLT approval; appropriateness of vehicular access off Industrial Parkway North; and all technical matters will be addressed through the site plan approval process. All comments, including any additional comments received from tonight's public planning meeting, will also be required to be addressed by the applicant with further detailed review of the proposal to occur. When appropriate, a staff report with recommendations will be brought forth for council's ultimate consideration. Following council's future consideration of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, a future common elements plan of condominium and site plan application will also be required. All interested parties will also be notified with any updates in regards to the subject applications. Staff also remain available for any questions tonight and moving forward in the process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. Mr. Romano?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, I would ask planning consultant for the applicant, Mr. Ryan Guder, to make his presentation. Ryan?
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, members of the public here. My name is Ryan Guder, and I'm land use planner with Weston Consulting. I'd like to just begin by highlighting a few elements of the proposal, and I want to thank staff for their work in presenting as they did some information. So tonight, I won't cover elements that have already been covered by my friend, but just to highlight that this obviously is the subject of an application that went through a process in 2021. It was ultimately acquired by the new present owner, and new applications were submitted that are the subject of this evening, and was very appreciative of the feedback that we did receive at the open house in September. So context, we know a pretty good idea. We're situated slightly lower in elevation from the intersection further to the west, obviously right in the major transit station area. And part of the context for this leads towards the proposed building composition that I'll describe in a moment. But just to give some context, as was pointed out, in 2021, a decision was rendered through the Ontario Land Tribunal. It identified site-specific permissions and site-specific zoning provisions as well. And we are seeking applications to amend those provisions to introduce a new form of development, also intended to deliver some additional housing opportunities. There's clearly additional units contemplated in a different composition, which I'll describe. And I just want to point out that as the lands are situated, this is intended to be the highest density in the town. We know that, and of course, part of our response is to reimagine what's been essentially nearly 3 years later, changes that have taken place to the housing situation, if you will. So you'll see in the composition of the building different types of units and a different composition of those units as well. But we're situated obviously in a transit area, priority for development to take place. One of the things that's important to recognize about the site is that it is immediately adjacent to other types of uses that are obviously in the form of commercial and other uses. So the nature of the relationships from the proposal to other uses is a little bit different. It allows us to have, in our view, some additional height while also being appropriately planned for this area. In terms of the existing zoning, we're modifying that through the rezoning application using the same designation and the same zoning category, but with different exceptions. So just to describe a little bit what you see on the screen, instead of 2 buildings connected by a podium, what we're looking at doing is having 4 building elements, each connected with a centralized area of amenity. Some of the areas I'll focus on in a moment will come a little bit clearer in the screens coming up, but it's an overall total number of units of 948 units. There's a mixture, and about 25% of those are 2-bedroom plus and 3-bedroom units. The remainder are 1-bedroom den studio units. And there's quite a variety in the size of those units as currently programmed. We have quite a range in unit sizes themselves. That is subject to refinement, but certainly we're catering to a more attainable form of housing in our view that would support perhaps those first into the marketplace to obtain a unit. What it's also important to note is at the immediate corner you'll see that the treatment is for commercial space that integrates into a seating area in pink that's highlighted on the screen right at the intersection Wellington Industrial Parkway. And the access points are identified with the arrows coming from Industrial Parkway. And so what you'll observe with some of the renderings as was described, the building composition is a stronger building presence of the lower levels. The upper levels of the stories up to 12 are in a different type of architectural treatment to enable them to sort of look and the expression to feel different than what's grounded on the lower portions in a more of a brick format. And that's intentional as part of the design. And we obviously had some feedback at the September meeting about some of the architectural treatments that we'll be continuing to work through as well. This is an illustration just to show the context of where we are relative to height above sea level. It's an illustration. We have lands in this particular site that are lower than the lands that exist elsewhere on the Young Corridor and elsewhere within the major transit station area. So we're actually at 12 stories. We're similar in terms of an overall height, which I think is just an important point to observe, that although we are seeking higher heights, we understand the sensitivity around height. We believe this site does lend to higher heights, particularly because of its interface with surrounding uses, but also in terms of its position relative to the GO station area and other lands that are situated further to the west. I'd like to just draw your attention to a few of the elements. We are providing for a mixture of uses at the ground floor and a whole suite of different types of amenities. So what we're providing for in the amenity suite is a series of activities that you'd expect both indoor and outdoor. And one of the things that we are looking at doing is actually providing some roof terraces and roof amenities in addition to what's on the ground, as you can see on the left side of the screen, highlighting some of those elements. At the corner, we're envisioning some retail space. I'd also note that we're going to be seeking a wide range of permissions. This came up at the community meeting as well, to ensure that if there's a need or demand for things like perhaps a daycare or a fitness area, or certain types of uses, that permission would exist in our bylaw. So it would enable those uses to occur. So we're looking for a permissive framework to allow that to take place. And we are seeking, again, the two applications. This just highlights some of the elements that we're looking to introduce through the amendment, seeking a height increase to 12 stories and permission of residential at grade. That just deals with some of the interface along the ground at grade. And then a variety of site-specific tailored elements to reflect the design, which continues to evolve, and we'll appreciate the feedback we hear this evening. There's a variety of studies that we've submitted that have been reviewed, are under review. We've received comments where we've not yet done a response submission to those, but we will be doing that. And of course, taking into account the feedback we received tonight. In addition to what was highlighted by my friend, we've just highlighted some elements that came up in the community meeting as well. Construction timelines, the nature of the unit composition. You can see that those percentages about just under 25% of the 2-beds and 3-bed units. We are dealing with traffic through the traffic studies, and the comments we've received talk about adjustments to signal timing and some improvements to the lane compositions as well that will be reflected. We are providing for EV charging stations, and of course, I commented about the retail space. We're looking to have a wide variety of uses there in order to cater to this as a key area for the town. And of course, examining architectural treatments. There is a future site plan that will have to be undertaken as well. So with those remarks, I'm obviously appreciative of your time and indulgence with presenting additional information. We do intend to respond to all comments received this evening, and appreciative of the opportunity to speak. So thank you, Your Worship, members.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to the public portion of this meeting. I have one on the list, Daryl Moore. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak to this matter? Nope, it's up to you. I just get you to state your name, Mr. Moore, and you have 5 minutes.
I've been a resident in Aurora almost 30 years now. When I first moved here, the population was less than 40,000. It's now up over 60, so we're getting close to 2 times the population. Probably, I figured there'd be more people here. When I first moved here, it was a nice little town, small village, you know, as people liked. I could walk to the grocery store. We would walk our kids to weekend things at the library and such. We live in the old part of Aurora, and it was really great. And as I said, the town is growing a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people have concerns about a lot of that. But what I want to say might surprise some people, because my view is that this development is probably about the best thing that we could have. One of the things I have lost in here is I used to be able to walk to the IGA at the corner of Yonge and Wellington. It's gone. Now I have to walk to No Frills. We used to be able to walk to swim on Industrial Parkway, and now all of that for our kids has moved up to Shawnick Center. So the downtown has been hollowing out, and there is much less walkable than it used to be, which is exactly the opposite of what you think. When the population goes up, we're looking for more density, we would expect to see more walkability, and we have seen less. I would like to see more developments like this. I think we can go a long way. I like the higher density because we need more of that. Affordability is an issue. And the only way to get better affordability is to make more smaller units that people can afford. I like the lower parking requirements because being as close to the GO station, you are going to attract people who don't want cars. So there will be fewer need for cars. This development will actually do more to reduce traffic than some other ones that put in parking. If you put in parking, it's like highways. If you put in the parking, people will use it. If the parking isn't available, you are going to get residents coming in who don't want it. And so you will improve parking that way. The building height, I think, is good because we need more, as I said, we need more of that. I think Aurora is being really simplistic, thinking they can get away with as low as it is. This is a wonderful place to put more higher density stuff, and we don't have enough of it. So I want to see more of that. The things I don't like about it is that this is being proposed strictly as a condominium. It would be great if you see more rental. We don't have enough for affordable housing here. So one of the proposals I would like to make, and I actually made it in an email to you before, but I'd like to restate it here, is that rather than debating whether to allow them to go up to 12 stories, I think you should allow them to go up to 14 stories and request that the extra stories, and maybe some more, be donated to the region for affordable housing, and let the region run those for affordable housing things. We can definitely support 14 stories. So many other places do. Newmarket has multiple ones. And this is an opportunity for this town to put in more. I'm out of time.
1 minute left.
Okay. This is an opportunity for the town to put in more higher residence, higher density that we need. And I think by working like this, by giving them this, you can leverage your ability to give them what they want by asking for a bit more in terms of affordable housing. And I think this is a great opportunity for you. Give them what they want, offer them a little bit more, ask for a few things in return. The only other thing that I don't like is the amount of studio apartments, 25% 2-bedroom. We want more families. So I think we need a higher percentage of 2+ bedrooms in this thing. That's all I have to say. It is in the email I sent to you. I hope you do that. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this application? Seeing none, so I will close the public portion of this meeting. Council, the recommendations that report number PDS 24-112 be received, and 2, that the comments presented at the statutory public planning meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future committee of the whole meeting. Someone want to move that recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, seconded by Councillor Weiss. Any comments or questions to the applicant or to the report? Councillor Weiss, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. There's been a couple of discussions here about apartments versus condos, and you're using the word apartment in the view, and I don't, and the resident suggests this is a condominium. So I guess we better be clear about what we're talking about here. Is this the purpose-built rental, or are these condominiums? Through you, Mayor, to the applicant?
Mr. Gooder?
My reference to apartment was in terms of apartment format.
Great.
The specific tenure ultimately has not been determined. We have not made application for a condominium. I think the current thinking is that it would be condo, but again, that is not the subject of these applications to determine the tenure.
Sure, that was my understanding. That was my understanding. I just wanted to clarify that this was not a purpose-built rental. And in our OP, we have this requirement of 35% of them being affordable, and we have new guidelines about what affordability is, not necessarily attainability, and you talked about attainability. Have you any plans for these units to be affordable, meaning in this community here, they're somewhere around $530,600 per unit? Is there a plan for you to make sure that 25 to 35% of these are affordable? Through you, Mayor.
Mr. Gooder?
Through you, Your Worship. There is a proposed shared equity plan to enable members of the community, first-time home buyers, to participate in the market with assistance that makes the units certainly affordable and assists. This particular proponent is also looking at, again, as anyone would, the pricing structure in the context of that policy of in areas where you've got a target of a certain percentage. That's not a project by project target. It's an area wide target, but certainly we are looking at that, and the shared equity investment program will assist in that as well. In terms of the specific metrics and pricing, that of course hasn't been determined just yet. But the shared equity program is a key part of that, and there's a willingness to provide that to the community to really assist, together with the additional number of smaller units as a key part of that. That allows us to get close to that type of a value proposition. So,
Councillor?
Thanks, and I think that's important for all of these new developments, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more detail about that and how you're going to make it affordable, because that's it's an important thing. It was mentioned by our delegate. It's mentioned by everybody in this community. I noticed there's the 948 units, which I think is significantly higher in density than the previous one that the Ontario Land Tribunal approved back a number of years ago. I'm just concerned about the amount of density here. I'm not so concerned about the traffic because of the issues that were brought forward with the parking. But through you, Mayor, do you have a plan B of something less than 948 to reduce the mass and the density in that particular area? I appreciate that we're trying to create density in the major transit station area and the reasons why, and I encourage that as well. I don't actually have a problem with 12 stories personally. I'm more interested in the amount of people, the density, the amenities that are going to be available, because I've seen you've taken amenities out. So if you could comment on the what has been taken out of this since the last time that we saw you, I think that would be appreciated by all through you, Mayor, to the applicant.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Weiss. I think first of all, we put the application forward as our plan A. There typically is a plan that results from the feedback. So I'm not going to commit to a significant reduction in density or anything of that nature. I think what's important to recognize is that when we have the right elements of a building and the programming is appropriate, then, and the unit types and the size of those units, that's really what's driving this. So in a 12-story composition, we're occupying just over 50% of the site area. We're not dominating the site with buildings. That's pretty reasonable coverage of building. We're connecting them with amenities. They have shared amenities between the buildings. We're looking at adjusting the town's 18 square meter per unit amenity rate down to what's, in my view, a reasonable rate, which is still greater than many of the area municipalities in the GTA that are delivering quality projects in major transit station areas. So the numbers that were referenced in the staff report in terms of amenity per unit, we're averaging around 6.8 per unit. Okay. Through some discussions recently with the architect, we're looking at increasing that to just under 10 per unit. That type of amenity, in my experience working in many different municipalities, is a very healthy, well-serviced, well-amenitized project that is delivering not only the amenities that would be programmed for each building, but also delivering the mixed-use elements. So we have other commercial space. So I would suggest to you that the composition, again, there's work to be done, but I think in terms of the overarching question of density and number of units, we're delivering more units in an area that's transit supportive and in the right type of composition. So hopefully that's of assistance. But again, when you can demonstrate that the traffic capacity works, you've got enough parking, you've got enough amenities, you've got enough mixture of uses, and the composition of the mass works, the density is appropriate.
Thank you.
Councillor?
I guess the other thing here that I'll just comment on the amenity space, because it's really a quality of life thing. I mean, you had it at 6.8, but you're suggesting maybe closer to 10, and I think that's a good idea. But what's allowed is up to 18 square meters. So it's not, you're somewhere in the middle, but you're not on the top end of that. And the other thing I'm pointing out is that there are 9 items, departmental agency comments that are still outstanding. So maybe through you, Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, are these achievable in a reasonable time? Because I looked at it's quite a large list, but I'm not familiar with the amount of time it takes for us to get those reports in to complete the application. So through you to Mr. Ramuno or Antonio.
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Weiss. So it's pretty typical for this type of application to have that amount of background studies. So they're out in circulation under review. The review hasn't been completed on all those applications, but again, we're at the early stages here, the initial public planning meeting. So if council directs us to move forward to a future general committee meeting, prior to reporting back to that committee of the whole meeting sometime in the new year, we'll ensure that all outstanding comments have been satisfied and any changes have been made by the applicant before we report back.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I'll yield the floor now to hear what my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garner?
Thank you. Hello for the second time. With respect to the amenity space, the 18 meters is a requirement in our zoning bylaw. So at the 6.8, is there any kind of a social interior gathering space?
Through the chair.
Oh, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gooder.
Through you, your worship, to the councillor's question, the variety of amenity includes the individual. So the total amenity is comprised of individual amenity space. So by a unit occupant, shared amenity space that's indoor, and that would contain a variety of different programming elements, ranging from things like perhaps a theater room or a fitness room, or looking at other types of amenities like that. And then there's also outdoor amenity. So the total amenity package, if you will, is comprised of those three main elements. And typically what occurs, if you recall the slide deck that provides some schematic expressions of what that might look like, through the process of site plan, we would identify very precisely what those types of amenities are, where they're located. The thinking right now is that there's going to be elements in each of the buildings, and that's part of the reason why we've got those interconnections between, so they can be used by all occupants. And the mixture of space, it's not all indoor, it's not all outdoor, it's a good balance between the different components of that. So hopefully that gives you a snapshot of the level of detail that's been thought through.
That was a comprehensive answer through Mr. Mayor. To continue. So individual would be balconies, where the stores are being considered amenity.
Ms. Gooder.
Through you, your worship, that's actually in addition to the amenities. So the amenity space I'm referring to is not the other types of uses that would be permitted, like coffee shop, small restaurant, other types of uses like that. They would be specific to the building occupants. So we're talking about a mixed use development. So you're going to have separate commercial space, and that's different from, and it's not a double counting of what would be amenities for the occupants. So two separate baskets.
Councillor.
Thank you. A question. So people from, through Mr. Mayor, people from outside the building would not be able to use the coffee shop, etc. Is that, am I understanding that?
No, Mr. Gooder.
The contrary, madam, they would have access.
They would
The
have access.
Public would have full access to those commercial retail spaces and any other community uses. For example, if it's proven to have a daycare that's workable and serves the area, then that would be fully publicly accessible. No exclusivity to that. And that's the intention why those are contained right at the corner of the key intersection. So they're in full public view, and we would hope that that becomes a bit of a destination in the area for people to use.
Councillor.
For Mr. Moore to walk to. It could be a long, cold winter, and it would be nice to have a social space inside where you could celebrate a birthday party or, whatever. It says in the staff report that further evaluation of the proposed development's built form and how it fits in with what the tribunal said. Would that be a question for you, Mr. Muno, or for Mr.
Romano?
Through Mr. Mayor, so that's just a comment that is part of our evaluation. We'll be looking at the built form. And again, we just made note that of the earlier OLT approval of the 8-story building. So it's just a general comment that is part of our review as something that we're going to consider, because they are asking for amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw to change the density, height, and the build form.
Council.
Through Mr. Mayor, the appropriateness of the connecting onto Industrial Parkway North. Wouldn't these, through Mr. Mayor to whoever, wouldn't these be matters that would have to be solved before council made a decision?
Mr. Romano?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So again, we're not asking for a council decision tonight. So that's just one of the issues that we've identified. We don't think at this point we have our traffic analyst has problems with where that northern axis is located. The southerly axis aligns with Center Street. We've already heard from the region that it's very unlikely the region will not permit a direct access from Wellington. It's a regional road and there's a grade difference. So again, we don't believe that there's an issue with the two access points onto Industrial Parkway.
Counselor?
Thank you. As a follow-up through Mr. Mayor, but there's no problem with the access at Center Street that faces Center Street. That's already a given?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that one,
Okay.
that's the ideal location that aligns with Center Street.
Counselor?
Yeah, thank you. I think the residents in that area won't agree with that, but it does seem to be the right spot. The last question for now to the applicant would be affordability. Or attainability? What price range are you in for affordability and attainability?
Mr. Gooder?
As I alluded to, the councillor, Councillor Weiss's comment, pricing structure has not been determined at this point. However, we are committed to the shared equity program that's been advanced. And we're also committed to providing a contribution towards that overall 35%, which is a target for the entire area. So we will be advancing those discussions, but I can't give you a number of price point this evening. This particular project is intended to be providing more attainable housing units, and the specific pricing structure is not confirmed at this point. I can endeavor to commit to you that we will be working through that with staff, and I can tell you the owners are quite excited about the interest they've had in the shared equity program thus far from the community. So,
Thank you. As a follow-up through Mr. Mayor to that, how many units would be able to take advantage of the shared equity?
Mr. Gooder?
at the community meeting, it was suggested around 10 units. That has changed since September because of the level of interest. Right now, it's in the order of perhaps 25 to 30 units. It may change as well as we continue to evolve. So that's something that is in active discussions. There's been a pretty significant interest, hundreds of individuals who've reached out, and the ownership group is excited to sort of embrace that and determine what the right number might be in the end. So that continues to evolve, but it has changed. And I have permission to express to you that change from the community meeting, which you heard.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't correct when I said I do have one more question through you, Mr. Mayor. Where is the green space here? You mentioned the roof. What about at the ground level? Are there any trees?
Mr. Gooder?
Through your worship, the site presently is occupying just around 50 to 53% of the site area. The remainder of that will be a combination of landscape treatments, hardscape and softscape together. So walkways, pathways, landscaped areas. So there will be a lot of trees. In addition to that, the programming of the amenity spaces, which you saw on the slide, will all be landscaped. There will be new trees, and the roof amenity areas also will be landscaped. And the way that typically works is if you're dealing with rooftop amenities, you're going to have greenery there. You might not have mature trees that are the same as what you'd have on the ground, but you can get very substantial trees in the right amount of soil volume on the ground and even at a roof level. So the intention is that's a detail that will be dealt with at the site plan stage. Our intention is that we're seeing this project as contributing to sustainability principles, all encompassing. So that is transit supportive, reducing parking, providing the right amount of density, and that'll also include landscape treatments and water management aspects as well. So,
Thank you.
Counselor,
Thank you.
thank you. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps you could just take another moment just to walk through the details of how the shared equity program works again, please.
Mr. Gooder.
I would be happy to, and I would encourage members and others to speak with the owners directly if I'm not going to do a full picture of that. The way that I understand the program to work is it provides for about 10 to 15% towards a first-time home buyer purchasing a unit. And the typical types of models where you see this, there's an expectation that the developer also receives a portion of any lift in value over time, over a 2 to 3 year period. That's something that this particular proponent group is not going to be seeking. And then ultimately, it's also an interest-free type of structure. So those are the kind of the basic elements and what distinguishes this particular proponent's initiatives. My understanding is that the proponents, some of them are actually from or live in the town, are committed to the town and committed to seeing residents and first-time home buyers be able to enter the market here. So that's a snapshot of the elements, Councillor. There's probably a lot more detail that I'd encourage you to speak with and connect with the proponents about.
Counselor.
Thank you. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the composition, you indicated that about 75% are going to be 1 bedroom or less, and the other 25% two bedroom more. I do share some of the thoughts that the resident had that, we want to be able to provide a wide range or mix of options for residents and young families. And so I guess, are you able to shed any light on how you kind of came up with that split being the right number? And is there any opportunity to give some consideration to increasing the number of 2 bedrooms or more?
Mr.
Your worship, to Councillor Thompson, the composition of the units have ranges in sizes first and foremost. So the 25% were in the 2 bedrooms, just looking at, it's about 700 to over 1,200 square feet unit sizes, which they do provide the opportunity for family-oriented units, and it's about programming the space. When we say family-oriented units in the context of Aurora, in a traditional low-rise development, that doesn't sometimes correlate. People don't understand that, but it is intended to respond to a different type of, again, family-oriented unit where you can have 3 bedroom units programmed well. In terms of the percentage of why 25% plus or minus and the balance the other, I think that's in part the programming of the buildings, but it could also be subject to change. And actually, we heard the comments this evening. We'll look at that and see whether there's a need to adjust. I think, in my experience, seeing how these types of projects respond in the marketplace, we want the units to sell. We want the units, in some cases, you may have people that want to combine smaller units, and they have the ability to do that, the financial ability to do that. And at the same time, we do think it's very important to provide smaller units and a greater number of them, given the area that we're in, the overarching sort of desire for attainable units, transit supported development, people without cars perhaps buying the units. So,
Councillor.
Thank you. And then final question to you again, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the site plan, it's easy to see the 4 residential buildings that are identified. The other building that's identified there, I think you said that would be a shared amenity space, but how high is that? Is it just 1 story or multiple stories?
Mr. Gooder.
Sorry, apologies, Your Worship. Yeah, it would be an amenity building. I think it may be only 1 story. I'd have to double check the plans on that.
Yeah, it just wasn't clear on the map that I have in front of me.
I believe that's the case. I'm going to look at the architect. 1 story.
you want to come up?
Yeah, just to be accurate,
Sure.
I'd give Reza the floor here for a moment on that amenity building.
Thank you, Ryan. Through your worship, good evening. My name is Reza Islami. I'm from Icon Architects. It's actually, it's not a one-story building. The access to the roundabout to the center of this complex is aligned with the center street, which creates this archway into the center part of this basically complex. That one building is actually part of building one. So the building one on the second story goes over the archway. So it's not a separate building, it's part of the building one.
So, Councilor, just sorry. So it's part of building number 2
2 or 3.
on the
I'm
map.
gonna, with the assistance of your fine staff here, pull up the ground floor plan, and I think it'll be quite
Perfect.
clear.
Yeah, I just think
I mean, on the site plan is between 2 and 3, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, you're correct. Building 2.
was part of building 2, Council.
Oh, yes. So this image is showing where the building the access at grade sort of cuts through that building. So it appears as though it's a separate building.
Gotcha.
But it's basically bisected by the access. So
Thanks for the clarification.
Council,
That's it.
Councilor Gallo.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Some of my questions were already asked and answered. I wanted to circle back to the amenity space. In reading the report, it was a red flag, as I'm sure for most of us. I'm happy to hear the increase to 10%. And if my math is correct, because I spent a little bit of time on this, at 948 units, 10 square meters is about 102,000 square feet, if my math is correct. That's roughly the size of a Home Depot, to give a sense of space. I really don't have a problem with that, depending on where it's located and where they are. But I think it's an economy of scale that we have to attribute to. If we were to put it to 18 square meters per unit, we're talking 2 Home Depots, and it just doesn't seem reasonable. So I'm happy you increased it. And even if it can go further, I don't think anybody will be disappointed. But to expect 18, I think is a bit of a stretch, notwithstanding the fact that it's in our bylaw, but you have to put it into the context of this size of a building. If this is to proceed in, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it's Mr. Ramuno or whose question or who will answer this. We may have issues with water and wastewater allocation. So how would we address that if this is to proceed?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gallo. So you're correct. Currently, Council, we don't have enough servicing allocation to distribute to any new developments. We're very limited, but we can still move forward with planning approvals, approving official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments. So if we get to a point where Council wants to approve a zoning bylaw amendment, it'll just be, we'd place a holding provision on it, and we could still review a site plan application. But again, we wouldn't approve the site plan application until servicing capacity was available. But there's no problem with going through the initial planning approvals, specifically OP and zoning bylaw.
Councilor.
So through you to Ryan, have you put any thought in terms of that particular issue? And is there any thought to staging in phases, or how would you guys address that?
Mr. Gooder.
Through you to Councilor Gallo, certainly we want to achieve the entitlements and secure the approvals that we need even if it has a holding provision, our desire would be to try to move forward with a building program as soon as we can get all those components addressed. So in terms of phasing, I think there will be a phasing plan. And that's something that we'd look at, whether we do a portion of the building, you know, depending on what would be available in terms of allocation. So that's something that we'll have to consider and determine what is available and what is not at the right time when we've secured the approvals. So there's more work to be done, but it's not uncommon at all to have those entitlements with holding provisions, and everyone works together to try to get building program going, and if need be, phase it. So projects like this can be phased.
Counselor?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, the new supply that's coming from the south, do you have a time frame of that? And does it line up at all with this type of development?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, Council Gallo, my apologies. I should have clarified that this property that was subject to the 2021 OLT decision, council did commit 223 or 224 units. So that still rests with this property and this new owner. So that's in place. With respect to the additional capacity, as you know, York Region is working on the North Leslie trunk sewer and various pumping stations. In the first phase, they're projecting the first phase to be complete by 2028. So by 2028, we should have a new tranche of servicing allocation that will see us for the next few years moving forward.
Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do we know what that number is? Do we know what potentially we would be getting?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a little early, but I think at one of the earlier meetings, the first phase may open up approximately 25,000 persons worth of allocation to be distributed amongst Aurora, East Gwillimbury, and Newmarket. So it'd be a pretty good chunk to keep us busy for the few years.
Counselor?
Okay. And just through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, in the report, it speaks to a minimum of 35% of new housing within the designation shall be affordable. We heard that it's, spread amongst the area, but could we get some clarity on, does this specific development need to have 35% affordable?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. No, and I agree with Mr. Reuter. I mean, the way that's the target, the 35% target, is within the major transit station area, that entire area. So it's not on a case by case or property by property basis.
Counselor?
Okay. Thank you. I'm in support of bringing it to committee of the whole, have them complete all the various reports, and review it at that point and see where we stand. There are probably some tweaking. Am I entirely comfortable with the density? I don't know. I don't have an issue with the height. I've been consistent throughout my political career that if you want to curb urban sprawl, you put density around public transportation corridors. And that's exactly what this is. So those are my views.
Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Guda, for delegating. When I look at the plan, the application, it's clear you want to maximize the space. When I look at the number of buildings, it doesn't necessarily equate to maximizing space, especially when you're asking for a lesser setback. So has there been any consideration to have two L-shaped buildings as opposed to four, to maximize the space and to try and to get the units that you want, and perhaps even more? But you lose the efficiency when you have those gaps in between the buildings. So I'm wondering why that is. Is it? I was thinking partly it might be because of the sales structure, where you want to phase in. You have to phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and as our director of planning suggested, that 220 units has already been allotted. So is that part of more of the sales and marketing plan, so that can allow you to sell phase one and move on to phase two, and according to the allocation schedule.
Mr. Good.
Worship, Councillor Kim, it's not so much a sales program or a phasing. I think there's principles of design that would address the length of buildings, for example, the nature of breaking a building. And if you saw from the renderings, what we've created is sort of elements of a building mass that don't dominate with a complete street wall, for example. So that's part of what's driving that design. It also allows for some variation and distinction so that it doesn't become sort of monolithic buildings that amass an entire frontage. So that's part of the intention behind the design. And really what we're looking at is sort of a centralized courtyard area with amenity and allowing for there to be distinction between the buildings, but also connected elements. So those are really, I would say, probably more design inspiration and good principles of architecture and urban design to create breaks and massing and to allow that type of transition to take place, more so than a sales or phasing model.
Councillor.
Thank you. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor. Unlike others who may have indicated about concerns about amenity space, I'm not so concerned about that, or park space, because we have Wilson Lambert Park, the Family Leisure Complex, Town Park, and you have the trail system just 200 meters east. So I'm not so concerned about amenity space. You know, I think my main concern would just really be the traffic, the results of the traffic impact study, which we'll get at the next phase. I'm sure residents who move into this project will understand beforehand what they're getting into. So I'm not so concerned about what their thought process is, but at the same time, with current residents, we should sure want to have an effective management plan, and I'll look forward to reviewing that at the next meeting. Another comment is I'm not concerned about height. I certainly believe that 12 stories is fitting, site specific in Aurora. I'm not set on seven floors because, you know, as mentioned in the report, this is no higher than what's already been approved near Town Park on Birdsea. And certainly we see YRT buses traveling essentially empty. So I'm certainly happy that those buses will be of use, and GO Train will be of use. So this is an appropriate location for high density. And I guess my final comments would be, the thing about the public planning process is that, short of us seeing a Hail Mary pass that's kind of a 1%, 99% of the application we disagree with, I don't see why we cannot move it forward to committee of the whole, given all the reports that we need to review don't come until then, and we certainly don't receive staff's recommendation, which is important to us, until then. So I have no problems with moving this to committee of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Last but not least, lots of great comments around the table. First, I do want to thank the resident, Daryl, for coming and sharing your words with us and the public as well. It's refreshing to hear some positivity with some density that and building types that we're going to hopefully support for the community, because we are in need. So I did want to thank you for that. As far as the project, a lot of the questions were asked, so there's really not much more for me to the shoulder on, other than the fact I wanted a little bit more context on the rooftop amenity space. I know that's something we've all been talking about, and I feel that we haven't really talked about the positivity of the types of uses on the rooftop that can be utilized and what those plans are, because I have been on some really nice buildings with the rooftops and the things that they can provide, whether it's entertainment space, barbecue. I don't know if there's a pool or not. I'm not trying to add things to your plate, but I think we should be really excited about that. I was hoping maybe you could provide some context of, the type of amenities that you plan on providing up there.
Scooter?
Through your worship, thank you, Councillor. The concept at the present time is a bit conceptual, not surprisingly. But what we're looking at, if in the roof plan, I don't know if it's of assistance, I'm happy to share this, but there's a combination of outdoor amenity together with the mechanical systems on each of the buildings. And what that will enable us to do is make sure that any programming, this may not, I think this is a good example. Thank you very much. So what you see on this is just one of the building elements. You see the outdoor amenity programmed and the mechanical penthouse. Those elements are confined to the center of the core, if you will, so that they're away from the edges, and that's reflected in the renderings as well. So they disappear from view from the street. But the outdoor amenity opportunities are really endless. What we want to make sure we're doing is we're not having, we got to control and maintain such that there's not crazy activities up there that would be disruptive. But you can do great things with barbecue space. You can integrate them with some shared sheltered areas. We have to deal with things like wind control. There'll be landscape treatments along the edges to ensure that there's the right amount of privacy, but also taking advantage of the breathtaking views that I'm sure we'll see from that top level. So what is uninspiring about this is you don't see the landscape details. You don't see the programming elements. That is yet to come, but we're certainly open to, we would want those spaces to be attractive, to be well used, to be well programmed for the types of spaces that they can be. And they might even evolve over time, depending on different preferences of the unit occupants. So the neat thing is that it's occurring and intended to occur on all of the buildings. And it will be a greater amount of area than what's currently shown on the current plans, because we are looking to add rooftop amenity to increase that amenity space.
Councillor?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That was important to have some context to that space, because it is valuable space that we should be utilizing, and you're taking advantage of that. So I do appreciate that. I also really want to commend you for the investment shared equity program that you are offering. And personally, I thought that was quite intriguing, and it does allow options for young families or young professionals to get their foot in the door to actually having the opportunity to purchase their first property, which is fantastic. Have you had support from other levels of government on this type of shared equity? Have they shown an interest in the type of investments that you are planning on doing?
Better.
My specialty in terms of awareness of that, I would encourage you to speak with the proponents about their engagement with other government bodies, but they're committed to it, and they've made that very clear. And I'm here to convey that commitment, but the details of it, I just encourage you to speak with them to understand more about it.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope more developers or applicants choose to be very creative in helping people attain their very first home. So I do really appreciate that. This is going to ask a question to Mr. Rumino. Through Mr. Rumino, Mr. Mayor to Mr. Rumino. As far as the reports, and I understand tonight we're not approving anything. This is simply just pushing to the committee of the whole. And I understand that with any of the outstanding reports, it's typical that we do receive feedback from the public and council. So at least we can address the remaining reports at the committee of the whole. And that is something we typically do. Is that correct?
Mr. Rumino?
Through Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's correct. I mean, the point of this meeting is obviously to gauge input from members of the public. And again, as we move forward, we'll finalize review of those reports, and any comments will be presented at a future committee of the whole report.
Councillor?
Thank you. And given that we've already assessed some reports on this property in respect to environment or water and so forth, at this time, we've pretty got a good assessment gauge on the property moving forward with this type of development. Would that be a fair assessment?
Mr. Romero?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's true. Because again, a lot of the reports were analyzed with the first application back in 2015 and resulting in the 2021 OLT approval.
Counselor?
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll just end on the note. I'm glad to hear that the applicant is willing to maybe perhaps increase that investment opportunity from 25 to 30. And hopefully you guys can get the shovels in the ground quickly because we are in need of this type of development. So thank you so much for bringing this application to us.
Counselor Gardner, second time?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the conceptual rendering. The one that faces looking west from Center Street. Is that, you said that building is all one building. Is that a drive through the building, a drive under the building?
Mr. Gooder?
Exactly where the access connects right through the building, as I described to, I believe it was one of the other councillors' remarks about that amenity building. So the building is, there's a pass through the building opposite the Center Street access, and that's evident in the rendering actually, which I'm happy to.
I thank you. And I do see it. And I'm wondering if there's going to be any extra soundproofing. It looks like there's dwellings on top of that, maybe beside it. I can't tell. But I mean, I think that would be very important to have some extra soundproofing for those residents who are living there.
Mr. Gooder?
Through your worship, there will be a very detailed noise assessment to ensure that all of the window ratings, all of the treatment of that is addressed so that there's no noise impacts whatsoever to those units.
Thank you. And I noticed one of the public comments was about having basically two different designs on the building. I think I'm looking at, there's 4 different examples here. I'm guessing that's to break up the massing of the building.
Mr. Gooder?
Through your worship, that's correct. So the choice of colors, materiality, and the variation of treatments would provide, in our view, and the architect can certainly hopefully smile behind me, in agreement that that's part of the intention of providing an attractive, high quality development. So variation in material, choice, color is part of the concept.
Counselor?
Thank you. And this is to Mr. Muno. Mr. Muno, is this going to be one of the largest developments in the area of the transit station?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, up to this point, yes, this is probably one of the largest applications we've received.
Counselor?
The reason I'm asking that is and I think this will probably be one of the largest, if we don't ask for the full amount of affordable housing from here, it's going to be, I mean, it's the average over the whole area. So it might, if this is one of the largest and we don't ask for the full complement, then the other developers are going to say, well, you know, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I mean, I think we should, but are we obliged to get a 35%? According to provincial policy, are we obliged to get 35% across the transit area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, that target's been there for some time in the provincial growth plan and the regional plan and the town's plan. It has been a challenge because we don't necessarily have all those financial tools. But as we've heard the applicant, this is one step towards more attainable units, is smaller unit sizes and that proper mix. So I think we'll continue to work with the applicant to see what we can do to perhaps increase that number.
Councilor?
Thank you. And I guess through you too, just a general comment. Did you say the apartment sizes were going to be 7 to 1,200?
Scooter?
Or was that just for the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom?
Scooter?
Through your worship, that was just the segment of the range between the 2 beds and 3 beds. There's other units at varying sizes. So I was just giving that example as.
Thank you.
Range,
And
yes.
Councilor?
I do know a fair amount about this, and that's a fairly generous size. I mean, we all live in much bigger, well, some of us live in much bigger spaces. But that provides for a 3-bedroom with 1,200 square feet. That can be a nice living space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim, a second time?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Ramuno, we talked about the affordable or attainable housing plan that's been put forward by the builder. If you can provide in our committee the whole report, if it does get there, just an example or illustration of how that works, because I'm sure this question is going to pop up again in committee whole. So if there's a ready example so that everyone can wrap their heads around, including the public, I think that'd be helpful.
Mr. Romano, I see you're nodding your head, yes.
Will do.
Thank you. Councillor? Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you everyone for coming out this evening. I mean, obviously the applicant and the public have heard from council some of the concerns or some of the issues that they've raised. We talk about affordability and attainable within our community a lot through every application that comes here. And I'm intrigued as well to learn more about the shared equity aspect of this proposal. We talk about creating a diverse housing stock and units within, especially the major transit station area. And if we can provide attainable units to our community, that's a good thing. So I'm looking forward as we go through this process to learn more about that. And obviously, once we get all those extra reports and studies that we need to make a decision, this council will make a decision at that time. So thank you, everyone. With that, I'll call the vote. Councillor Gillen? Yes, Councillor Gillen's yes. That carries unanimously. Next application. 5.2, Mr. Romano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask our town planner, Kenny Ng, to provide the presentation and overview on the second item. And then at that point, we can turn it over to the applicant's planning consultant, Mr. Adam Layton, to make his presentation. Kenny?
Kenny? Oh. Kenny, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of public. My name is Kenny Ng, and I'm a planner with the town. Tonight, I will be providing an overview of the subject lands, planning applications, the proposal, as well as next steps. The subject lands are municipally known as 252, 260, and 272 Old Bloomington Road. They're located north of Old Bloomington Road and east of Yonge Street. The subject lands are located within a predominantly residential area and are surrounded by estate residential uses. The properties are approximately 3.89 hectares or 9.61 acres in size. The subject lands are designated as suburban residential and environmental protection in Schedule B of the official plan. Additionally, the subject lands are located within Yonge Street South Secondary Plan area in Schedule C of Town Official Plan and are designated cluster residential and environmental function areas within the secondary plan. The subject lands are currently zoned as estate residential, which permits for a single detached dwelling. As you may or may not know, The original applications were presented to council in the November public planning meeting last year. Comments received at the meeting expressed concerns about density being too high, feasibility of the proposed road connection to lands to the west, which may encroach onto existing environmental features, a lack of comprehensive consultation with area residents, as well as some other block plan related concerns. The applicant has since submitted a revised proposal to address comments received at the initial public meeting. The revised official plan amendment will have a reduced proposed density. It will also amend development policies related to lot area, building coverage, etc. The rezoning application will rezone the subject lands to 2 site-specific R3 zones and an environmental protection zone. The draft plan of subdivision has been revised to have reduced number of lots, revised right of way, and relocation of block access reserved for future connection. The revised OP amendment will permit a maximum unit density of 7.72 units per hectare, which is reduced from the original 8.5 units per hectare. Also, the amendment will permit a minimum lot area of 0.07 hectare per unit, an increase from the 0.06 hectare per unit from prior. Policy amendments related to developable lands, impervious area, and building coverage remain unchanged from the previous proposal. The zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the subject lands to 2 site-specific R3 zones and Oak Ridges Marine and Environmental Protection Zone. As you can see, the R3 zones are labeled as R3-XXX and R3-YYY. The 2 site-specific zones share very similar properties, and the R3-YYY zone will only apply to Lot 14 only, with slightly deviated zoning relief from R3-XXX to accommodate for the particular lot fabric, which includes redefining the street line, as well as further reduce front and side yard setbacks. As you can see from the slide, the applicant has lowered the number of proposed lots from 33 to 30 to allow for reduced overall density. The proposed public right-of-way will terminate in a permanent cul-de-sac in the north end of the subject lands, which differs from the original proposal, which was planned to extend to connect with lands to the west. To accommodate the new future connection to lands to the west, the applicant has relocated the future access to a mid-block connection. The future road connection block, shown as block 32, now aligns with future road connection block 33 to access lands to the east. The size and location of the EP block is unchanged from the original proposed draft plan, as is the future road access to lands to the east. The applicant has submitted a revised block plan with several updates from the original block plan. The updates made on the submitted draft plan are reflected, such as the aforementioned reduced lots, relocation of future road connection, a new road that will terminate in a cul-de-sac. A further review of the proposed applications has been undertaken by town departments and public agencies since the initial public planning meeting. Following matters have been identified to be addressed. Peer review of the proposed development limit and buffering established by the natural heritage evaluation, appropriateness of the proposed road network and lotting pattern for future development in Block C, the proposed site-specific zoning reliefs on development standards, as well as any comments to be received at this non-statutory meeting. Next steps in the planning process. Following, staff will continue to review the revised applications and provide feedback to the applicant. Comments from the public and council raised at this meeting will also be considered. When appropriate, a staff recommendation report for council's consideration will be discussed at a future committee of the whole meeting. All interested parties will be notified of any updates relating to the subject applications. That concludes staff's presentation. Please direct any questions or comments on this development to my contact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Romano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we can now ask Mr. Adam Layton to make his presentation for the applicant.
Mr. Layton, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Kenny, for laying out the project quite succinctly and quite well. There's really not much for me to touch on that Kenny has not already done, aside from some of the details of the project where I've oriented them in a slightly different fashion. What I've shown here on this slide is just a comparison of the R3 zone provisions, which, if you recall from the November council public meeting, where I described that the R3 is the parent zone that has been applied to the Ambria development, which is currently under construction just a little bit west of the subject property and also within the same development block of the Yonge Street South secondary plan. So in this case, we felt it was a good benchmark from which to assess the suitability of the proposed lot fabrics and development standards. You can see in this case, but for the front yard, the side yards, and coverage and height, we're maintaining all the other relevant standards, and most importantly, in my opinion, would be the lot area and lot frontage. This indicates that we would have at the minimum lots that are no smaller than what has already been approved for the Ambria site. In terms of front yard, we are applying a more modern urban standard that I would call with a increased setback to the garage and a decreased setback to the main wall of the building to help bring the livable portion of the building forward and provide less of a car-oriented feel along the street. In terms of the interior side yard, we are looking to reduce that to 1.2 meters across the board rather than having it increased by 0.3 of a meter for two-story buildings. Exterior side yard, a similar reduction to 4.5 meters for the majority of the site and 3 meters for the YYY exception, which I will show you in more detail in a following slide. And similar to the prior submission, the nominal increases to the proposed coverage and building height. In terms of the block plan, as indicated, Kenny indicated, we've updated it to show the revised lot fabric with the road connection. If you can see the laser to the east and west, brought further south from the prior alignment, and which is, I think, best shown on this side-by-side comparison. Essentially, that has allowed for a more straight a more direct road connection across the site to the east and the west. It has relocated it further south and away from the natural feature, which was a concern raised by the adjacent landowner, given that there was not a detailed study at that time of the adjacent lands. So in this case, we've protected for just the eventuality that the feature may extend a little further south than what exists on our property. And as a result, the overall density and unit count has been reduced by 3 lots from 33 down to 30. Going back to the block plan for a second, you might recall we described the configuration of the block as a whole, which even with the increased density at 8.5 units per hectare, which is calculated on a gross basis within the Yonge Street South secondary plan, the overall block still maintained a density of 5 units per hectare. With the reduction in the lots in the density on this site, that density has simply just gone down further. I think we're just about 4.5 units per hectare now rather than 4.9, which is what we were at the previous concept. Moving along, the site plan layout, as you're seeing on the screen, it has been rendered to show the landscaping. There would be a full boulevard planting plan provided through the detailed design. The yellow portion that you'll see at the north end of the cul-de-sac at the rear and side of the northernmost lots, those are actually areas to be added to the natural buffer in order to provide both a net gain, but also regularize the limit of the residential area. the typical conditions of LSRCA would be applied. We have received, in fact, their conditions already, being a black chain link fence on the one side when those lands are conveyed to public ownership, and then there would be privacy fencing on the residential side of the development. Moving to the next slide, this shows the YYY zone condition, for which is specific to the one lot on the property, and you'll just see it's largely as a result of its orientation along the cul-de-sac. It's a zoning peculiarity or technicality, but this whole lot line, given that it does not break, would be considered the front lot line. So we are attempting to clarify and make a little easier to interpret what is the front lot line and what is the side yard setback. So again, we will continue to work on that standard with staff. And just lastly, remind you of the proposed or conceptual streetscape. We are proposing a variety of unit designs and unit types, which would be subject to architectural control, and ranging from more traditional to more contemporary. The average unit size, at least on the smaller lots, starts at about 2,000 square feet and does increase from there. So there is a wide variety of sizes and configurations, which we feel directly addresses the need for a diverse configuration of housing sizes and types. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Now open it to members of the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Yep, come on up. I can just get you to state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Warren McClure, and I'm a co-chair of RAISE. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, many of whom I know, staff, and for any other residents that are concerned of this application tonight. Together with John Green, who has submitted a letter, I believe you've all received it, on behalf of ratepayers. The ratepayers group of Aurora, just for reference, is in operation now for some 30 years. Over the years, our defining purpose as a group has been to support and preserve the zoning of 2 units per acre in South Aurora. First, a bit of background. The lower density in the area is due to the fact that originally homes built here were serviced by their own wells and septic systems, which required a minimum of 2 acres of land. As services became available, the zoning was increased to 2 units per acre, as set out in OP 34. This lower density created a rural feel to the south entrance of Aurora. Council of the day, and indeed many of you here tonight, still support this distinguishing feature of Aurora that sets us apart from many other municipalities. However, this did not deter many landowners over the years from submitting plans requesting higher densities. However, with the strong support of council and staff, we have, for the most part, prevailed in maintaining the zoning of 2 units per acre. The application before us tonight is yet another example, an effort to disregard the zoning through increased density. The application represents a 3-fold increase from 2 units per acre to 6 units per acre. Notwithstanding what I just heard from the planner, this in comparison to Ambria Homes, which is currently underway to the west. On that 25-acre parcel, they are constructing 50 homes, 2 units per acre. And by way of commentary, RAISE, our ratepayer group, has been in constant contact with Vince Baffa of Ambria Homes as they have progressed their application and their adherence to the 2 unit per acre bylaw. Plus, their recognition of environmental and wildlife corridors has been exemplary. It is very refreshing indeed to deal with such a developer in our community. Although it is well known that as of late, the governments are pushing for increased densities, it is up to the town to ensure it's done in such a way that's compatible with new developments. There is emphasis in Aurora's official plan, and I quote, "The policies of this plan ensure that Aurora's stable neighborhoods are protected. Aurora's existing neighborhoods, both older and new, are not only a defining element of Aurora's character and urban structure, but also a tremendous asset and attractor for new residents and investment interests. This plan seeks to ensure that the stability and vibrancy of Aurora's stable neighborhoods are protected from the negative impacts of potential incompatible development and growth pressures. Any infills that occur must be compatible with the established community Town of Aurora official plan, January 2024. And further, one last point. It's important to keep in mind that these lands also fall within the Greenbelt and Oak Ridges Moraine and due special consideration. In summary, on behalf of Raise, our position there is no logic to allowing 6 units per acre on land zoned for 2 units per acre. In addition, if approved, it will set an obvious precedent to others contemplating land developments in this area. As such, we respectfully request that planning and council work with this owner to develop these lands in accordance with the current bylaw of 2 units per acre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Any other members of the public that would like to speak on this application? Come on down. Welcome. If I can just get you to state your name, and you have 5 minutes now.
Right. Come on down. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Rosemary Humphreys, president of the Humphreys Planning Group. I represent the landowner immediately to the west of the subject application. We share its westerly boundary or its property line. I was here about a year ago in front of you in response to the application with comments, and I had submitted a revised letter to you all yesterday. Hopefully it was circulated and you have copies of that. So I guess I wanted to let you know that we're not necessarily opposed to development at all as it relates to these lands. We do remain concerned as it relates to the proposed design of the subdivision and the zoning that you see in front of you. And through my letter, I think I've got 3 or 4 points that I'll just quickly review with you. The first item, and it's shown on attachment 1 to my letter, is the alignment of the east-west road through the block plan area. There's been a realignment of the road connections in an east-west manner. And as it relates to my client's site, there's proposed to be an offsetting of an intersection. We are questioning the appropriateness and in terms of how that has been designed and whether or not it's actually even acceptable. We have had discussions with the planning staff and the applicant's planning consultant, and I think they're agreed to look at that in more detail to see if they can clean that up. The second comment that I would like to make is with respect to the block plan. We made this comment previously. The applicant's proposal seems to have smaller lot areas and frontages, while the remainder of the plan has been lotted out with greater or larger lots with larger frontages. And we are actually questioning whether or not the applicant would be prepared to revise the block plan to show all the lands that have not yet either received an application or received an approval be lotted out with a similar density to understand whether or not the overall 2 units per acre can still be accommodated in the overall secondary plan area, as he's indicated that he does comply with today based on his current block plan design. And the final comment that I have for you tonight, and I did speak about this last time I was in front of you, relates to the existing right-of-way that my client enjoys over top of the applicant's property. There is a right-of-way, and I've shown it on attachment 3. I've indicated where it's located. It generally is in alignment with his proposed north-south road, but at the north end of the site, it does go through his proposed lots number 15 and 16. So we're really questioning the viability of having a right-of-way that runs through the middle of the lots. Would certainly like to have that looked at further through the application planning process, if that was possible. And we are also still concerned about how the existing right-of-way will be maintained during construction should the application be approved and move forward through the development process. I guess I have one other question for you. In listening to the application that was dealt with just before this one, there was a comment made that there's no further servicing allocation available in the municipality. And I was wondering if that is true for this application that's in front of you tonight. So that's another question I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close this portion. Sorry, one sec. I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Council, the recommendation is that report number PDS 24-113 be received, and 2, that the comments presented at the non-statutory public planning meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future committee of the whole meeting. Did someone want to move the recommendation? Councilor Gilliland, is there a seconder? Seeing no seconder. Someone want to move to receive at this point? Councilor Gallo, second. Councilor Thompson. Comments or questions to the proponent or the report? Councilor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Romano, the current block plan in that area now, is it compatible with 2 units per acre?
Mr. Romano.
Through Mr. Mayor, based on the current sort of draft block plan, that area of town covers approximately 100 acres, and the applicant in that block plan is showing approximately 200 units. So yes, currently it's around 2 units per acre.
Councilor.
Thank you. And with the letter that was submitted regarding the entry point and right of way, is that something that we're currently working with the applicant right now?
Mr. Romano.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we've had a meeting with the Ms. Humphreys, and moving forward, those are items that we can deal with this applicant, and typically there'd be conditions attached to any future subdivision approval. And it's also my understanding that I think the applicant to the west is also working on a application to submit to the town over the next few months.
Councilor.
Thank you. And I guess the last question just about allocation, it was brought up. I'm just wondering if maybe you want to comment on that, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, our current reserve, we're at around, 800 persons equivalent, which is, roughly, 250 to 300 units. So we do have a small reserve, and it's really, up to council to determine where and how to allocate that to individual development applications. But again, we don't have very much. Again, 200 to 300 units worth at this point.
Councilor.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Romano, with regards to the conceptual block plan, it's simply that, just a concept. There's nothing that prohibits the owners of those other properties from bringing forth an application with greater densities.
Mr. Romano.
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And then it'd be up to council to consider any future application.
Councilor.
And I think, it follows along with the last delegation we had, where there was a landowner expressing a concern that everybody within that block plan should have same densities. And so if council wants to move forward with this application, which grants greater densities, then I think we could be facing a situation where everybody within that block plan could want a similar or a fair equitable approach and have the same densities, and then we no longer are in alignment with OPA 34. So I think that's important to consideration. I think that as was stipulated earlier, we have a landowner, Abria, who's developed a 2 units per acre. They've abided by our official plan. An official plan we just recently approved. We left OPA 34 in. We continue to support OPA 34. Yes, we need to build more homes. Yes, we need to look at areas within our community where intensification makes sense. But we already have nearly 5,000 units already approved. We have an influx of applications seeking higher densities. We have opportunities to pick and decide where we think the most appropriate areas of town are for intensification, like the previous application. And yet we also have the opportunity to preserve areas where we want to maintain that look and feel and environmental aspects of it. And this is one of those areas. We don't need to go above and beyond what's already stipulated within our official plan and what has been conceptually envisioned for this area. We can stay at 2 units per acre all throughout this whole this block plan. And so I still have questions about density. I'm still concerned by raising the bar for this one. It's a domino effect for everybody else in that block plan, because they can simply just say, you've given it to them, I'm going to approach and ask for the same thing. So, you know, similar to the last time it was before us, my comments remain the same.
Councilor Gallo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Ramuno. I'm just trying to understand 2 units per acre. Understand Ambria homes have complied with that. And there's the applications under current review, and we have this application. So there's applications to the east and to the west of this one. Do those 2 comply with, if we were to separate them? I realize it's applied across the whole area, but if we were to just apply to the specific lots, would they comply with 2 units per acre? The ones that are under review, east and west of this application?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, it's going to be difficult until we see the future application, but with the applicant just to clarify, it's true Ambria was at 2 units an acre. It was a 25 acre site. This current application before us is, notwithstanding one of the delegates, is at 3 units an acre. It's a 10 acre site and they're proposing 30 units, so it's at 3 units an acre. The property to the west that Ms. Humphreys is representing, if that one comes in, I think they are looking for, it's a similar size. There's a number of owners there. It's probably a similar size property as this, 10 acres, could be a little more. Again, I haven't seen the details, but I think based on her statement, they're looking for similar lotting sizes at around 3. Again, they do have, it's difficult dealing with individual parcels like this because some of them, and you know how we interpret the density. I mean, it's clear in the OP. It's 2 units an acre at a gross level, so it includes any environmental land. So some of these areas have environmental lands to the north, larger land holding, hence the unit count can come up. Some of the other blocks further to the east may be a little smaller. And so again, I think the intent of the block plan is to lay out the infrastructure framework for the road patterns, servicing connections, protection of the environmental lands, primarily to the north, and try and provide a consistent lotting format. Currently, that block plan, again, it's a conceptual block plan, but based on that overall block fee, it's showing approximately 2 units an acre.
Councilor?
Thank you. And I realized it wasn't going to be an easy one to answer. I'm just trying to get a sense of, is this, if we take it on its own, more dense than the other ones to the east or west than it appears to be, and certainly more dense than the Ambria home development. That's my biggest concern. That's why I didn't support moving forward. I want to have a better discussion and a better understanding of those densities.
Councilor Gardner, first time.
Excuse me.
Having the same problem. I think it's dry in here.
As Councillor Thompson said at the first public planning meeting, we can be open to reasonable or slight alterations to our OP, but this application is asking for substantial increase. And we always look at provincial planning policy. If we look at the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan, as Councillor Thompson pointed out again last meeting. The Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan is allowing 25% maximum of the land to be developed. And this is asking for 70%. It is so contrary to public planning policy, the provincial public planning policy. The building coverage permitted is 12%. This is 25%. Maybe it's a little bit less now because they've adjusted it from 33 homes to 30 homes. But one of the things that really bothers me is that the report last time said that development standards will have to be amended, and that includes the policy for impervious hard surface. And the moraine is all about filtering water. And so this would really be a significant change. I don't think we noticed it last time, but the proposal was to change the environmental function area to the north to an EP area. EP is much less protective than environmental function. The environmental function area is it's given that designation because it's very important. And one of the reasons in this case is it's the headwaters for many streams and rivers. It's the source for many streams and rivers. So all in all, to me, this is an application that doesn't fit in with our official plan, doesn't fit in with the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. It's in our OP policy, but it's also provincial policy. And the last thing, well, I was concerned about two things last time that wasn't on the list. One, the staff list this time. One was the wells, protecting the future viability of wells in this area. And the second one was the rolling nature of Old Bloomington. This block plan, as it stands, I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mino, has 9 private driveways on it. Everybody should have a drive on Old Bloomington Road. It's rolling. The sight lines are difficult. To put so many private driveways on this road, just from what I can see in the block plan, is to me a big safety concern. So I'd just like to leave that comment with you, Mr. Bruno, when you look at the block plan. We certainly don't want to be causing accidents on this road. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. Councilor Reese.
Yes, and thank you, and thank to the everybody who presented today, and particularly those from the Ratepayers Association. I appreciate the advocacy that is extended there, and I know the reason why it is. My question here is really about, and I will, as Councillor Gallo suggested, I'll vote to see this go through, but I think, first of all, I want to thank you for the second time coming to public planning. Shows an effort to or an interest in changing, but I really think there's some changes that are still required. Even in the report from the town, it suggests on the page 5, the amendment will permit zoning relief on the development of standards, including height, lot coverage, side yard setbacks, encroachment permissions, redefining daylight triangles, street line, and establishing landscape requirement. That's a laundry list. It's a big group of things that really need to be managed. And this one, this time through, I haven't seen it being managed as well as it could be. So I'm going to ask you through the to the applicant, do you feel that there's room to work on changing the density to get it to meet OP 34 and some of the other items that are here, so we can be confident that you can come back with something that's a little closer to our OP 34 through you, Mayor, to the applicant?
Slayton.
Thank you, Councillor Weiss, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we'll have to take all the comments back tonight and review. I would suggest that this reduction in density tonight does represent certainly a best effort to to try and bring the development closer to a vision of this area of town. I would like to clarify one thing, though. It was mentioned how OPA 34 was maintained in the secondary plan, or sorry, in the newly adopted OP. You might recall that during the consultation on that OP, I appeared before you requesting that perhaps it was an appropriate time to look at the provisions of the secondary plan, given their age and the changes in provincial policy and regional policy. And it could have been done concurrent with the OP. To my knowledge, no changes have been made. So while it is correct that yes, OPA 34 was maintained in the OP, there was not a review done to determine whether it maintained consistency or conformity with the York Region OP. The current, and this is where we get at the end of this month, the current PPS, the current growth plan, and the soon-to-be provincial planning statement. So I will take it back. We will obviously take things under advisement. I cannot say I don't have a crystal ball, but we will certainly take all the comments under advisement. Thank you.
Councillor?
Yes, I just encourage you to do that. Thank you. All for me.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the presentation, one of the feedback from residents was lack of consultation with local residents. So through you to Mr. Ramuno, can you describe the extent of the consultation with the residents and the consequent feedback?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council Kim, I think the deputant was referring to the lack of consultation, or perhaps a level of consultation between the applicant and the ratepayers group. With respect to our town staff and town public consultation, again, you know, this is we're following our practice. This is our second public planning meeting. So I think they were referring to the perhaps the lack of consultation amongst the applicant and the ratepayers association. And I'm not privy to, you know, whether they've met or not. I don't recall whether they have or not. They may have.
Councillor?
Thank you. I mean, with all planning applications, it's always desirable, and it's it's a critical part of the process to consult with the local residents who will be directly impacted. Over the years that I presided here, along with fellow councillors, we've put every effort to maintain and stand by OPA 34, and my perspective is that, given a couple of other applications that we declined, my preference is for us to keep the dialogue in the public forum. And for that reason, my preference is to move this to committee of the whole, just to keep the dialogue in public. I'm not, in this current application, I'm not in favor. But I do want to keep the dialogue moving and in the public forum. And because, as was discussed in previous planning applications, now I just look at this as, is it defensible? And frankly, I believe our position would be, if we were substantiating OPA 34. But given that there's even a sliver of room for flexibility and perhaps dialogue with the applicant, just for that reason, I'm open to moving it to committee of the whole. And it doesn't mean that we're for or against. And personally, I'm not for this application as it currently stands, but I don't want to have this dialogue go into closed session and the local residents not be participating. And so for that reason, I would be for moving this to the committee of the whole.
Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The comment about OPA 34 was maintained. OPA 34 is based on the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Act and plan. And to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't been altered. And I think our position on this is very defensible. As Councillor Thompson said, we've just finished our new OP. It's contrary to our OP, not only contrary, but substantially out of line with our official plan. It's way out of whack with respect to the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. So I will also suggest we go to the committee of the whole, but this application as it stands, reducing from 33 homes to 30, and that's the best that the developer can do for this public planning meeting. The developer would have to do a lot better to present something that respects the land that this is. It's settlement, but it's settlement on the Oak Ridges Mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. Just to circle back on a couple of points, I think that the chart within the staff presentation says it best. I mean, we're not just talking about the density and how that doesn't align with OPA 34, but we're also talking about the other exceptions that they're asking for that doesn't align both with OPA 34 and what Councillor Gardner is referring to with regards to the Oak Ridges Marine Act. We're talking about the maximum net developable lands. It's only supposed to be 25%. They want 71. That's not just a small increase. That's a significant increase. The impervious area is only supposed to be 15%. They want 36.8%. Again, not a small increase, a significant increase. The maximum building coverage is only supposed to be 12%. They want 25%. The applicant made reference to the growth plan and provincial priorities. We're all well aware of those. That's why we go through our exercises of the official plan. But it's our job to work with the community and create the vision that we think the community wants and is best for future growth, and to identify those areas of intensification. I mentioned earlier, we have nearly 5,000 units already approved. We have seen an influx of applications. We're going through this process. We just had one prior to this one, which talks about intensifications, and some of the comments are around the table where that seems to be a more appropriate area for intensification, given its proximity to the GO station and being in the MTSA area. We don't need to increase the densities and the targets within the southern part of Aurora and change that character to meet the growth plan provincial priorities. We're already doing that. We're doing that throughout the community. We're doing that in areas we think are best. And again, I think we can achieve all that we need to achieve to fulfill our responsibilities and obligations without having to touch the southern part of Aurora. Let's maintain the character that Ray's and everybody else has strived for many, many years to preserve. Let's support what we have in our official plan. Otherwise, we should have changed it, but we didn't because we agreed with it.
Councillor Gallo, second time.
Thank you. And I share those views. And, as we saw before this one, we're very much open to revisiting our official plans where it makes sense and where we can defend something. This appears to be one of those applications that is just pushing those limits way too far. That doesn't necessarily benefit the community. I don't see the benefit to the community to have those kinds of densities and that kind of lot coverage. I don't have an issue for it to come back to committee of the whole, but I can assure you if it remains the same as it is, I'd have a real tough time supporting it. But I hope they're listening, and I have no problems giving them a chance to come back and reflect on everything they've heard. And amend the application accordingly.
Thank you. Councillor Kim, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on what I've heard around the table, I think there is some level of consensus, which I'm in agreement with, and based on Councillor Thompson's passionate perspective, I suspect that him being the councillor in Ward 4, he's heard from his constituents, and and so I'm in agreement in terms of, if Councillor Thompson wishes to move this to committee of the whole, just to have that line of communication and dialogue and keep this in the public forum, I'm open to that. Given that there is a sharp difference in the application and our OPA 34, I'm open to declining this right here and now, because certainly I think there's general agreement that this is certainly defensible. So I'll leave that to Councillor Thompson.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Rumino. Currently, if the applicant were to come back to meet the 2 units per acre on this particular parcel of land, what would the lot size that they would need to adjust to and from?
Mr. Romano, do you know that?
Through Mr. Mayor, right now they're at 30 lots, so they'd have to come down to about 20. And obviously they'd be wider frontage lots.
Do you have numbers? Roughly?
No, I think most of these are probably around 50 foot. So they would probably range from, around 70 foot, again, depending on the configuration.
Councillor?
Thank you. I just wanted to have some context in the size of properties that we're talking about. So essentially a 50-foot lot to a 70, maybe 75-foot lot, depending on the configuration of the property. Does that sound correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just looking at the draft plan. It looks like some of the existing lots, based on the current proposal, range from 50, and there are some 60-foot frontage lots. So,
thank you. I just want to have some context of what's being asked of the applicant to make that reduction and the type of housing that we're advocating for. As far as like next steps, I do agree that this should still be in a public forum. More often than not, something like this will be received or denied and then ends up in closed session. And I think it's better to do this in public, which is why I'd rather see this go to a committee of the whole. And so we can have that discussion. The applicants heard everybody loud and clear and what the thoughts are about this property. And I think that I would rather see this go to a committee of the whole. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I did just want to point out, I mean, it was mentioned that OPA 34 was not reviewed. Well, it wasn't reviewed because this body decided that it didn't need to be reviewed, and we stood by OPA 34. So I did want to make that clear. And there is a uniqueness to Aurora when you come north from the south on that south end of Aurora. There's a reason why when people drive along Bloomington, they can sure tell the difference between Richmond Hill and the town of Aurora. And that's because of our OPA 34. And we've seen it with the last application. We can be flexible when it comes to our OP, as Councillor Gallo mentioned, and as Councillor Thompson has mentioned, but it needs to be in the areas that we deem to be the areas that we want to see intensified. And that's specifically in the MTSA. So I think that the applicant and the residents have heard the concerns, not only from themselves, but from around this table. Hopefully the applicant will make the necessary adjustments, and I'll leave it in council's hand in regards to what we do from here, whether we go to committee of the whole or we take other action tonight. But I'll leave that with you guys. Does anyone want to put anything forward? I need some kind of direction. Councillor Gallo?
Second recommendation in staff report to go to committee.
Committee of the whole? Okay. Seconder, Councillor Gardner, thank you. Pardon? We'll just take that as a friendly amendment. I'm assuming it was the first one was moved by Councillor Gallo was putting this one forward. Councillor Thompson, you're okay with that as a friendly, or do you want me to make it as an amendment? Councillor Thompson?
I'd be willing to see it go to the committee of the whole, as long as the understanding is that unless the density changes, I would vote against it.
Yeah.
Then
I think that's been shared pretty much around the table. I just wanted to know whether procedurally I move forward as a friendly amendment or if I,
Friendly's
okay,
fine.
friendly's fine, friendly's fine.
I stated my point.
I'll just wait for it to come up, all right, and then we'll call the vote. Okay. Call the vote. Councilor Gillen? Councilor Gillen's a yes. That carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. If you want to stay informed, please fill out the green sheet. If any residents want to stay informed for any future meetings. Confirming bylaw. Councilor Gardner, Councilor Weiss. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Kim, Councilor Gallo, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.